Here from Cisco's Worldwide Collaboration Sales Organization, where I oversee our sales strategy and sales go-to-market for team collaboration. But today, our topic is not going to be anything Cisco related. Instead, we're going to talk about the meteoric rise and catastrophic fall of AOL Instant Messenger. And the reason why this is such an important topic, everybody always tells you you've got to explore the products that fail and why they fail. So there's definitely a big piece of that with AIM, but you also get the other side. You get to see why and how it succeeded. So you get both ends of the spectrum here. So hopefully by the time this wraps up in 15, 20 minutes or so, there's going to be some pearls of wisdom that you can walk away with and just have a better understanding about our collaboration landscape and how we came to be where we are today. So first, we're going to take a little hop into the time machine, and perhaps you can guess what year we're talking about here. But this movie was tops at the box office, and I'm sure you know what movie that is. Grandmaster chess player Garry Kasparov loses to IBM Big Blue, and one of the things that really put artificial intelligence kind of front and center for common people, and I think from that day on, just continued to see more and more of it. It's certainly a massive topic today, especially in collaboration. On the publishing front, relatively unknown author came out with the first of what will go on to become an insanely popular series and lead to movies, and her becoming a billionaire author. Just absolutely amazing. All that started this year as well. From the technology side, you may have heard of this site. Google came out for the first time trying to displace our friends at the search engine Yahoo, and I believe Ask Jeeves and Dogpile and Alta Vista were around at that point. So hopefully Google had a more successful run than AOL IM. So in case you're trying to figure this out, the year was 1997. And this is probably the first, and I venture to guess the only presentation I'll ever have that has any sort of picture or reference with the Spice Girls in it. So one other thing happened in 1997 that I didn't put on here yet. And that thing that happened was that this came out. So, think about what was going on in 1997. People had dial-up internet. Email was still kind of taking off, not certainly as ubiquitous as it was today. And when people were dialing up, AOL was the primary internet service. I mean, it was everywhere. There wasn't anywhere you could go where you didn't see those free AOL compact discs with the software on it, whether it be stuff you got in your mail or at stores, literally everywhere. And, what was interesting about Instant Messenger, it began as a skunkworks project within AOL, the company. And, it was really kind of pushed aside. A lot of the executives said, hey, if you engineers and architects want to work on it, do it on your own time. Don't take away from the resources, personnel and technology resources of, the other things we have going on. But if, you want to do it, go ahead and do it. And they did. And, the big kind of switching point was when they decided to break this off and have it be its own independent piece. But before, they had a lot of apps that was part of the AOL dial-up platform. But now this Instant Messenger became a standalone application that anybody could download, whether you're using CompuServe or NetZero or any of the other providers at the time. And that really made the total addressable market anyone who was looking to get online. So, if you were a student at this time, if you were a technologist at this time, or anyone in any sort of profession really that utilizes IT, you probably remember this screen because, in those late 90s, everybody was using it. I remember when I started work at Accenture in 1998, and this was the tool that we used for all of our business communication. They said there was a time when Wall Street ran on AOL Instant Messenger. So we're going to take a quick look at what some of those innovations were and, what is that path as it kind of rose to success here. So the first thing to understand, it was one of the first virally adopted apps. When this was first launched, it was put on an AOL FTP site. They didn't even put it on the AOL website. So, you had to understand what FTP was. You had to have an FTP client, and really not very straightforward and easy for people to download. But once they flipped that on, people started grabbing it virally and helping others understand how to get it. And pretty soon, this screen was something that just about everybody around the world had. And what it did, it changed the way we communicated. Because think about this time again. This is before MySpace. It's definitely before Facebook, before Twitter. It's before Web 2.0. So a lot of the message forums, weren't even in place yet. If I look at what was going on collaboration-wise on the internet, there was a lot of activity in like guest books on web pages. That was a big collaboration area for a lot of sites. So this changed things. I mean, this gave us real-time text-based collaboration, nice and light, because again, the internet dial-up, not very heavy, doing stuff with video or voice or even images was a little heavy. And with this, it was text. It was nice and light. It was easier for us to collaborate. And the way this worked, you would have kids on the bus together coming home from school, or people working together in the computer lab in college, and then they'd get home, fire this up, and a few minutes later they'd be talking again. It was an extension of the way that people communicated with one another. And this is really the mind-blowing stat here. So by the mid-2000s, you had what was basically a skunkworks application control over 50%, up to 52% of the online instant messaging market. And this wasn't just from a commercial perspective. This was also at the enterprise level. Again, I mentioned how we used it at Accenture. Wall Street used it. Just about everybody was using this, and partly because there was no enterprise option, no good enterprise option in place. So we were using this left and right. Some of the innovations that Instant Messenger brought along, things like the buddy list. I don't care what collaboration tool you look at today, just about all of them have some sort of list of who your top collaboration people are and who you need to reach out to. That started here. Some foresight too with the warning and the blocking of users. You see the little icons down at the bottom. They knew that this was going to be some sort of way that people could offend others, and you might want to just, stop that. So you warn them, they get the little lightning bolt, or block them so they can't communicate you. Just a lot of stuff that was, well thought out, somewhat ahead of its time, and you'll see kind of made its way into other future applications. The customized away profile and away status messages. So status is so important in collaboration tools. Letting people know where you are, what you're doing. Are you able to communicate right now? And with AOL, I mean, it was big fanfare when you were away for people to look at what your away message was. It was almost like part of your personality. You had bits about who you were and what you liked, and maybe you had song quotes or other quotes. There was all sorts of markup that you had in here. So there was really a lot there, and really helped kind of personalize a lot of this application for you individually. Also popularized internet slang. You probably know just about all of these on here. With that last one, POS, it may not be what you're thinking of, but if you remember when this came out, heavily used by school-aged children. So POS was parent over shoulder, just so that whoever they were communicating with would know to be very careful with what the next thing they said was. And dumb parents probably had no idea what that meant. But it really gave rise to this new way of communicating. And I mean, these are all ones we use all the time now, whether it be on Twitter or on Facebook, and SMS for sure. And also custom buddy icons. Being able to choose how you wanted to represent yourself. Again, any collaboration tool today has that as well. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, they all have that, and all that started here. So much of what we see in modern day collaboration tools started back here with AOL Instant Messenger. They were so far ahead of their time, it was unbelievable. Now, there was one thing in addition to all this from a milestone perspective, and that was the fact that this was all in the cloud. If you look at what some of the early cloud applications were, this was one of them. So, little example here. I mentioned how we used it at Accenture at the time. We, even though Accenture IT consulting firm, when I started in '98, we weren't issued laptops, believe it or not. As we went on to each engagement, were given project laptops. So whenever we were going from a laptop to desktop to whatever else, we'd have to reinstall all of our apps, and it was just absolutely nightmarish process using zip drives and all that. But the one app that made things easy was AOL Instant Messenger. So why was that? The reason it was easy is because everything was in the cloud, your buddy list, your profile, your away message, your settings, your config. So if I went from this laptop to this desktop, I wouldn't have to go through this complicated process of reconfiguring and re-entering all my information and setting it up. All I would have to do is download the executable for the app, put in my credentials, and boom, everything was already there. So that's the beauty of the cloud. We still see that today, but back then there wasn't a lot that provided that sort of convenience. So, with all these innovations and all this forward thinking, you would think that the trajectory of this would just go up and up and up and up. Well, unfortunately, it didn't, because 20 years after it launched, they pulled the plug on it. It was dead. And, even worse than that, probably halfway through, I think by like 2010, 2011, the percentage of people using AOL IM had dropped below 1%. So, even though it was around 20 years, by like the 12, 13-year mark, it was pretty dead anyway, which is kind of amazing when you consider just how far advanced it was. But, there were a few reasons why it died. It certainly died from the business side. I mentioned from the start, the AOL executives, they never wanted anything to do with it. Yeah, they always treated it as a separate thing. They never did a good job, the due diligence around figuring how do they monetize it. And what they didn't appreciate was that the true value was the people using it. And I think that was something where they failed, pretty heavily on. They were a little slow, moving things to the mobile platform. So just a lot of business decisions hampered AOL IM. But then think about things from the enterprise perspective and the space that most of us play in. Why did it die there? And that's what we're going to talk about now for the second half of this. And the reason why it died is, in addition to all those innovations and firsts that it was also one of the first shadow IT applications that corporate IT and InfoSec wanted to get rid of. And the reason they wanted to get rid of it was, these 6 things that I'm about to go through. But, this really set the stage for corporate IT and InfoSec to realize, hey, people can bring their own applications into the workspace, and we need to make sure we understand what they're bringing in and how we control that. So the 6 things from an enterprise perspective that really killed it. 1, think about updates. Updates is one of those areas from an administrator's perspective that you want to make sure you control. Whether you are staging the updates so that when software is being updated, your whole user base knows what's going on, so you can provide the proper training. But with this, it was different. Everybody was on their own schedule. They were doing their own thing. You could have had people using all sorts of different versions. And this doesn't even get into the complexity of what happens when tools start auto-updating. If you're IT from a corporate perspective, you have no control over this, and that's bad. That's scary from a training perspective. It's scary from just what's on your employee's desktop perspective. Second one, data's living off-site. You are having your company is having these conversations, and that data is not living within your own servers. It's not even living in servers that you have any sort of control over. This is living in AOL, in their corporate servers that you have zero access to. And that is very, very scary. Reliability and availability. So, lumping these two together. There was the joke at the time that AOL Online was really AOL Offline because of how often it crashed and how often it just wasn't available. So, when you think of your business critical applications, you can't have them failing. You can't have them not available. But when you're dealing with a third-party tool that, again, you have no control over, that can happen. So that's something that needed to be kept in mind. Administration. So this is kind of the common theme that threads through all of this. Now, if you're an administrator, within corporate IT, you can't provision this. You can't set up users. You can't really do anything from an administrator perspective. So all the things that they do to help push out and promote and really help with the various apps that are used, AOL Instant Messenger was not part of that because it was so separate, so outside of the bounds. Now, those four alone were probably big enough reasons, but these last two, I mean, these are the 1-2 punches, and these alone would have ended it, and really the primary reasons why it ended. So one, security and encryption. I look at tools today, like, I mentioned working for Cisco, WebEx Teams, we've got encryption at rest, we've got encryption in transit. So it doesn't matter if we're hacked as the messages are going through the internet, doesn't matter. It's encrypted. Somebody hacks into the database, doesn't matter. It's encrypted. But with AOL Instant Messenger, even early on, you're talking plain text. This was a hacker's dream. So if you are an enterprise, you definitely do not want your proprietary information and things that people are talking about just being sent plain text, clear text, just so easy for anyone to hack into, and then forget it, you're done. And then lastly, compliance. Whenever I have a conversation with customers about collaboration, security and compliance are always the first two topics that come up because these are the ones that always, based on what your answers are, could say whether or not a certain product is a go or a no-go. If you look at compliance, and I've got this broken out here because compliance isn't just one bucket. There's a lot of different areas that make up compliance. AOL Instant Messenger would have gotten an F on every single one of these. Data loss prevention, e-discovery, legal hold. There was no way for a corporation to do any of that with AOL Instant Messenger. Privacy. I talked about how, when we were using this, you had your buddy list and you could set up different groups. I distinctly remember I had my personal group and I had my Accenture group and, a few others, depending on what various client I was working at, I would have them. So how easy would it have been for me to accidentally paste something that was proprietary to somebody that I shouldn't be? Super easy. And if I did, there was no way to get that back. There was no way for AOL to say, oh, hey, it looks like you're about to send a credit card number, or you're sending a social security number, or any sort of scrubbing of any files being sent. Didn't have it. It didn't have it at all. So, just holes completely all over the place from a compliance perspective. And again, that sunk the ship. All these sunk the ship, but, that without a doubt, because there were no answers and really brought the end to it. So 2017 comes along, 20 years after, AOL says goodbye. And, it was unfortunate. There were a lot of interesting messages and tweets that people put out. There was a whole Reddit thread talking about people's memories with AOL IM. And, it really was that transformational type of application. And, again, I think by understanding the different elements of it and how it rose and why it failed, we need to keep that in mind when we're thinking about collaboration today and the tools we're using today, because it's without a doubt one of the best case studies. I do encourage you, do your own research into it, especially if you were a user of it. So, there's a little bit of that nostalgia there, and you can relive, what you had going on back then. And as always, anything that I do, that I present, love to continue the conversation. If you want to hit me up on email, or if you happen to use Cisco WebEx Teams, you can access me that way. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, C. Palermo, or if you are a user of Twitter, follow me. I'm always talking about all things Cisco Collab and WebEx and artificial intelligence and remote work and machine learning. So lots of good stuff there, and look forward to interacting with you on there. So with that, I thank you for spending the last 20 minutes with me, or If you're smart and do what I do, you were playing this at 1.5 speed, which I guess would have made this, what is that, 15 minutes? Maybe less. But anyway, hope there was something good in there for you. Enjoyed walking you through this little trip down memory lane. Okay, take care. Thanks, everybody.